Imagine you are an Ethiopian government official. You're 1,000 miles from Jerusalem, and you're reading a scroll in the back of your chariot. You're reading a chapter of Isaiah, and you stop. You read it again, and you ask your companion, "Of whom speaketh the prophet this? Of himself or of some other man?" That's Acts chapter 8, and the question that stopped the official roughly 2,000 years ago on a desert road in Gaza has stopped serious readers ever since as well. Isaiah 53, 700 years before the birth of Christ, one of the most debated, most quoted, most contested, and most worshipped passages in all of human literature. Rabbis have wrestled with it, reformers have built theologies on it, and Latter-day Saint prophets have staked their lives on it. And tonight, we're going to take a closer look at it. So welcome to Come Listen With Me. I'm Ricky Black, aka Elder Eleazar, and this week is Holy Week, Easter week, all week long. We're going to be releasing deep dive videos on different angles of the Easter story. And yesterday, we covered the prophetic map of Holy Week, right? Every prophecy, every fulfillment, and today we go deeper into the single most important prophecy in that map, and that is Isaiah 53. And I want to do three things. I want to read it carefully. I want to survey what the four different Christian traditions hear in it. And then I want to show you why the Book of Mormon's witness to this chapter changes so many things, and they're important. So let's jump right into it. So before we get to Isaiah 53 itself, I want to zoom out for just a few minutes because Isaiah 53 doesn't stand alone. It's the fourth in a sequence of four prophetic poems that scholars call the servants' songs. And these are found in Isaiah 42, 49, 50, and then the big one, Isaiah. It's actually 52 verses 13 through 53 verses 12. Now, think of the four songs as a story in four movements, right? The first song introduces the servant, elected by God, filled with the Spirit, commissioned to bring justice to the nations. It's a quiet figure who doesn't shout in the streets, but will not fail or be discouraged. The second song tells us the servant was called before birth, right? From the womb, and given a global mission, not just to restore Israel, but to be a light to all nations, salvation to the ends of the earth. He hits a moment of discouragement along the way. I have labored in vain. And he receives an even bigger calling. And then the third song goes darker. The servant is beaten, his back given to those who strike him, his cheeks to those who pluck out the beard of his face not hidden from shame and spitting. He does not resist. He sets his face like flint. The suffering is vivid, but we still don't know why. And then the fourth song, it tells us the why. Structurally, the fourth song has 5 stanzas. It opens in Isaiah 52:13 with God declaring that the servant will be exalted and lifted up. And even though his appearance has been marred beyond human likeness, it's still going to be lifted up. And it closes in Isaiah 53:12 with God again declaring his vindication, his portion among the great, his triumph, right? The suffering is really sandwiched between two declarations of exaltation. And there's no tragedy here. It is an exaltation that simply passes through suffering. Okay, so I'm going to read the sections and then unpack each one as we go. All right, so in this part, we're going to actually start in Isaiah 53, and this is verses 1 through 3. Who hath believed our report, and to whom is the arm of the Lord revealed? For he shall grow up before him as a tender plant, and as a root out of a dry ground. He hath no form, no comeliness. And when we shall see him, there is no beauty that what ye should desire him. He is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows, and acquainted with grief. And we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. All right. So that's verse 1 through 3, the rejection. Who hath believed our report? That's the opening question. And it's a rhetorical lament. Right? Not many people have believed. The servant grew up like a root out of dry ground, not in the privileged soil of palaces, but in the hard earth of ordinary life. No beauty, no majesty, just despised, rejected, acquainted with grief. Now, the Hebrew word for grief here is choli. It's the same word used for sickness and disease. And this figure is intimately familiar with human suffering at its most raw. Now, one detail worth noting here, we hid, as it were, our faces from him. When humans suffer in a visible, disturbing way, our instinct is to look away. And Isaiah says that the servant's suffering was so severe that people actively hid their faces. And when we, the we of the poem, esteemed him not. All right, continuing on. Surely he hath borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord hath laid on him the iniquity of us all. So that's verses 4 through 6. And here is the theological heart, and I want you to notice something about the grammar. Like the whole tone shifts here. The we, the collective human voice speaking through the poem, it confesses a terrible misreading. Surely he hath borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. We looked at the servant's suffering and concluded it was divine punishment. Yet we were wrong, terribly wrong. And there in verse 5 it says, but he was wounded for our transgression. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. Right? The Hebrew word for wounded here is chalal, right? It means pierced, profaned, violated. It's not metaphorical wounding, right? It is a physical, violent, real wound. And the result is our shalom, our peace, our wholeness, our restoration. His violation produces our completeness. And then verse 6, all we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord hath laid on him the iniquity of us all. Notice the two alls. All of us went astray. The iniquity of all of us was laid on him. So the Hebrew kalanu has no exceptions, right? Whatever is the scope of the problem, like the full breadth of human wandering, that is the scope of what the servant bears. All right, and continuing on for verses 7 through 9. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He is brought as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before his shearers is dumb, so he openeth not his mouth. And he was taken from prison and from judgment, and who shall declare his generations? For he was cut off out of the land of the living. For the transgression of my people was he stricken. And he made his grave with the wicked, and with the rich in his death, because he had done no violence, neither was any deceit in his mouth. The silence, yet he opened not his mouth. This is one of the most humanly remarkable features of the passage. When we are unjustly accused, the instinct is to defend ourselves, and the servant does not. He is led as a lamb to the slaughter, right? The Passover lamb, without blemish, and he is silent before his shears. So Mark 15, it records that Pilate marveled at Jesus' silence. He had seen many defendants. He had never seen this before, right? Pure silence. And then in verse 9, and he made his grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, because he had done no violence, neither was any deceit in his mouth. So a criminal executed by Rome would be buried in a pauper's grave, right? The servant, though, ends up in a rich man's tomb. And in Matthew 27, verses 57 through 60, it gives us the whole story, telling us exactly how, right? Joseph of Arimathea, a rich man and a disciple, claimed the body and laid it in his own newly purchased tomb. All right, continuing on, and this is verses 10 through 12. Yet it pleased the Lord to bruise him. He hath put him to grief. When thou shalt make his soul an offering for sin, he shall see his seed and shall prolong his days, and the pleasure of the Lord shall prosper in his hand. He shall see of the travail of his soul, and shall be satisfied. By his knowledge shall my righteous servant justify many, for he shall bear their iniquities. Therefore I will divide him a portion with the great, and he shall divide the spoil with the strong, because he hath poured out his soul unto death, and he was numbered with the transgressors, and he bare the sin of many, and made intercession for the transgressors. The vindication, yet it pleased the Lord to bruise him. This verse has troubled readers for centuries, and understandably, right? In what sense did God take pleasure in this? Now, the Hebrew chapetz doesn't mean delight in suffering. It means the suffering was consistent with God's will, ordained by him, purposed by him. And James Faust, he put it pretty well. So the Father didn't take pleasure in the suffering of his Son, but he was pleased that his Son would obediently offer such a sacrifice. The words in verse 10, they translated offering for sin is asham, right? The guilt offering from Leviticus. The servant's soul is made a formal atoning sacrifice under the sacrificial law. And this is where the moment where poetry and liturgy meet. It's really beautiful. What Israel has been enacting in the temple for centuries with animals was always pointing forward to this moment, to this suffering servant. And then he shall see his seed. After all that suffering, the servant will have descendants. He will prolong his days. He will see the fruit of his labor. He will justify many. He will be given a portion among the great. Now, this chapter does not end in the grave. It ends in triumph over death. So, now that we've read through that, I do want to spend some time on the question that I find really interesting, deeply interesting. Like, what do different Christian theological traditions hear when they read this same chapter? Because what you bring to Isaiah 53, it shapes what you take away from it. The Reformed or Calvinist tradition. So Jonathan Edwards, John Calvin, and the Westminster Confession. For those theologians, Isaiah 53 is the Old Testament's clear statement of penal substitutionary atonement. So it's God's justice. It required punishment for sin. And that punishment fell on the servant. So the Lord hath laid on him the iniquity of us all. This is the forensic transfer that they use, right? Our guilt moved from us to him. Our punishment bore by him, right? The asham of verse 10, the guilt offering, it clinches it all. And Christ just doesn't sympathize with us. He took the sentence. For the Arminian or Wesleyan tradition, that's John Wesley, Jacob, Arminius, or the Methodist heritage, these theologians, they read the same verse, but they emphasize the universality, right? All we like sheep have gone astray. And the Lord laid on him the iniquity for all. For Arminians, like, the atonement is genuinely sufficient for every human being. The provision, it's universal, but it must be received by faith. Like the we of the poem model, exactly that part of it, right? It's confessional of having gone astray and recognition that his suffering was for us. Now, in the Molinist tradition, which is probably less familiar to most people, but it is important in Catholic and a minority of evangelical circles. See, Molinism emphasizes God's middle knowledge, right? His perfect foreknowledge of what every free creature would do in every circumstance. And the phrase in verse 11, by his knowledge shall my righteous servant justify many, is sometimes read as pointing to the servant's own comprehensive knowledge of every person and situation. The atonement was not a blind sacrifice, but a perfectly informed one. And then there's the restored gospel, or the Latter-day Saint reading. And this is where I want to spend the most time, because I really think that it brings something that the other traditions don't have in the same way. So if you go to Alma chapter 7, verses 11 through 13, Alma is prophesying of Christ's coming, and he says, and he shall go forth, suffering pains and afflictions, and temptations of every kind, and this that the word might be fulfilled, which saith, he will take upon him the pains and the sickness of his people. And that's Isaiah 53:4. But Alma also expands on it. He doesn't just say Christ bore our sins. He says Christ bore our pains, our sickness, our infirmities. And he tells us why. That his bowels may be filled with mercy, according to the flesh, that he may know, according to the flesh, how to succor his people. The LDS atonement, it's not just a legal transaction that clears our record. It's an educational experience in the most profound sense that gives Christ an exhaustive, personally experienced knowledge of every form of human suffering. He doesn't just forgive us from a distance, right? He understands us from the inside. When you say you have a personal relationship with Christ, it's not that he knows all your sins, it's that he has personally experienced them. He's experienced their pain, and he's experienced the pain of the punishment that goes along with that. So he can carry a personal relationship with you in a way that nobody else can. And then D&C 19, verses 16 through 19. Christ's own voice in this dispensation describing the Gethsemane experience says, which suffering caused myself, even God, the greatest of all, to tremble because of pain, and to bleed at every pore, and to suffer both body and spirit. He is describing Isaiah 53 from the inside. And this is the servant's own testimony of what that chapter actually felt like. Okay, so let's discuss the Book of Mormon witness. Now, I know most of my viewers are probably members, but for those of you who don't, take some time. I think you'll appreciate this. And I want to make an argument that I think is really underappreciated, even among Latter-day Saints, right? The Book of Mormon doesn't just quote Isaiah 53. It is an independent, pre-Christian witness to the messianic interpretation of Isaiah 53. You see, Abinadi, around 148 BC, he's standing before King Noah and his priests. He's facing death. And he quotes Isaiah 53 in full. Now, we call it Mosiah 14, and he then spends 2 chapters explaining it. See, his central claim is that the servant is the Lord himself, the Father and the Son, coming in the flesh to redeem his people. So think about what that means historically, right? Abinadi is interpreting Isaiah 53 as a messianic prophecy of a coming Christ roughly 150 years before Jesus of Nazareth was born. He has no New Testament. He has no knowledge of the crucifixion. But what he has are the brass plates and the spirit of prophecy. And he reads Isaiah 53 as a portrait of the Redeemer. So when critics say that the messianic interpretation of Isaiah 53 was invented by early Christians to justify their belief in a crucified Savior, the Book of Mormon is a direct counter-witness. It predates the New Testament interpretation. It comes from a completely separate geographical and cultural tradition, and it arrives at the same conclusion. This chapter is about Christ. And that's not something you can explain as a literary borrowing or a theological retrofitting. It is either prophetic inspiration or the most elaborate fabrication in the history of religion. I'll let you draw your own conclusions. Okay, so wrapping this all up, Isaiah 53 has been called the fifth gospel, the Old Testament's Passio Christi, the crown jewel of the Hebrew Bible. And all of those names, they're very well earned, but they can also keep it at a distance, as a remarkable literary artifact, a theological argument, a proof text. So I just want to close by going back to those 6 words in verse 5. With his stripes, we are healed. Not we were healed, we are healed. It's present tense in the Hebrew. The healing that Isaiah saw in the prophetic vision is a continuous present tense reality for anyone who comes to the servant. And that's not simply doctrine, it's a promise, a personal promise. And it's a promise that was written down 700 years before there was a cross to make it even possible. That's all I have for you today. And if this has meant something to you, please share it with someone this Easter season. And the full article, if you want to go into this more, it's linked in the description. And it has the 4 tradition comparisons, the key term breakdowns, and also some discussion questions for personal or family study or even sharing with a class. And stay with us this week too, because we've got a new deep dive every day as we approach the most miraculous day when Christ took up his life again and walked out of that tomb. Until tomorrow, as always, appreciate you all, and I thank you for choosing to spend some of your precious time to come listen with me.
come.